All right, welcome to Hope Shot. I'm Sonia, and I'm so glad that you could join me today. I have my good friend Angela, who was a reality TV star on Locked Up Extended Stay. Thank you so much for joining me today, Angela.
Hi, Sonia. Good morning.
Good morning. And first, let me just tell you, I am so proud of you. I'm so glad that you came to join me today. We are here to stomp out the stigma of addiction and hopefully leave you with a shot of hope by the time that we're done. All right. So first tell me, how does it feel to be known as somebody who's been incarcerated?
Well, I mean, incarceration in general is a real test of character. I mean, you learn how to deal with a lot of people with multi-personalities, and then you realize within yourself that you have a lot of those same characteristics. It teaches you patience and acceptance because you don't know what's going to happen with your life and your future and your freedom. So, I mean, being known on the outside, you have more challenges because you have a record that you have to prove that you're no longer a part of and that you no longer do. And that's even 10 times more challenging, especially when you're focusing on recovery.
Right. Well, I just want to say I am so proud of you, and I love that you pulled the positives out of there, like being patient and acceptance and all of those things. So, okay, so tell us a little bit about your childhood.
Well, I was born in New York, born and raised. Um, I lived there for my whole life. My childhood was a little bit rough, only considering that my brother was born with a rare birth defect. And he had a total of 23 surgeries leading up to his death at the age of 22. So my entire childhood I spent in hospitals, in and out. Like, my parents really couldn't focus on me. I was always with like a babysitter, my grandparents, and looking for love in places that were not my family. My brother like had a 72-degree angle in his spine, and they did spinal rods, and they ended up paralyzing him from the waist down in the 7th grade when he was like 13, and he never walked again. And then he ended up passing away in his sleep at the age of 22 due to complications of that surgery. And just watching basically all of that happen really affected my life to the point that I was just rebelling and just acting out for just any kind of attention or love or just anything.
Mhm. So, would you say that led to your addiction?
Well, I was in a car accident. I was in a really bad car accident and I was ejected out the windshield. I wasn't wearing a seatbelt. And that was my first experience with painkillers. I was like on liquid morphine, I was on Percocets, they had me on Xanax because of the trauma. And I just basically I couldn't stop it after that. I remember my doctor was like, Angela, you're, so backed up from all the opiates. He was like, you're so full of shit that your eyes are going to turn brown, So at that point, I realized that I had a problem, and I was just basically getting prescribed all this stuff, and I just never stopped. So that
Right.
was the lead to my addiction.
And it's interesting because that's very common. A lot of people's addictions started out with a prescription from a doctor for a completely justified reason and then weren't able to stop.
Yeah.
So tell me about the first time that you got in trouble.
The first time that I ever got in trouble, well, it was by my parents. I was in the 7th grade. And well, no, I was 7 years old. I'm sorry. And I put lotion in my babysitter's purse because I didn't like the way she talked. And I don't know why. But that was just, yeah, a character defect of mine, I guess. But the first time I've ever gotten in trouble with the law, I was actually smoking weed behind school, and we got caught smoking weed, and I was in the 9th grade. And at that point, that started my criminal history. Even though it was a misdemeanor, um I then realized that I had no respect for authority.
Yeah. And I know you also did a quite a lengthy stay in prison. Can
Yes.
you tell us what that was like?
I had a difficult time in prison. I grew up there. So when I went to jail, I was 16 years old. It was for assault with a deadly weapon. You know, these my baby father and his friends had robbed my house, and I just found out that I was pregnant, and I lost my shit. I went in and I ended up assaulting him and shooting the kid. And um I really never um I really never like acted like shot a gun before. I didn't know what I was doing.
Mhm.
And thank God that he didn't die, and thank God I didn't get attempted murder. I ended up doing 10 years and then having to finish my sentence, and a total of 15, because I came home and I was meeting my daughter for the first time, and I went to Walmart thinking it would be a good idea to steal $700 worth of Hello Kitty stuff because I was meeting her and I was so excited and I had no money. And I ended up getting caught leaving the store. So I had to do all my good time, which was the remainder of my 5 years. And just in jail, like, I was young, I would gossip, and then I would get into fights, and I was getting bullied. And it wasn't until I learned how to stick up for myself that um to protect myself, really. I did like 2.5 years in solitary confinement because this girl hit me with a lock in the sock, which is I'm missing a tooth at the bottom.
Mhm.
And I ended up, cutting her in the face with a can top. And that experience of being in solitary confinement, like 24 hours a day, not seeing sunlight, not seeing anybody, just food trays like 3 times a day, was a real test of myself. I watched like 21 people hang themselves in that kind of situation. I was like shell shocked when I got out. Like I was like a dog that was locked up in a cage for all that time.
Mhm.
And it gives, even to this day, it still gives me social anxiety. Like I can't ever get rid of that feeling. But for the most part, I mean, like, I did hair in jail. I learned how to really deal with people in a different way than I used to, because who wants to mess with somebody who's doing life? But I couldn't give up my addiction even in jail. So I would manipulate officers to bringing me in stuff, and just the soul rush of knowing that I was doing something wrong and I was still getting away with it was a whole different experience. And that also brought me more problems because people didn't pay, then you had to fight, and then people would steal from you. And it's just, you fed into the addiction of a whole bunch of criminals at once in one setting, and you couldn't escape it. Like, you were around them all the time, 24/7. And then it wasn't until somebody was falling asleep on chicken patty day at the mess hall when they realized that I was bringing stuff in.
Mhm.
And at that point, it was like, wow, okay, I'm gonna get in trouble. They actually took me to the emergency room and did a cavity search on me, which is where they found all the drugs, and then I got a missing contraband charge. And I could have did another couple of years because of that, and I risked it all just to feed my addiction, and it was crazy.
Wow. And I just want to say, like you said, you started out your first sentence in jail and prison when you were 16 years old. So that was like what you were taught. It was a way of life. And I think that a lot of people don't understand that when you grow up in that type of environment, it's like what we're bred to do. It's the lifestyle we live, and we don't know that there's another way because it's all that we've ever known.
Yeah.
So tell me, when did you realize that your addiction was a problem and you needed to do something about it?
Um, I realized that my addiction was a problem when I couldn't get up in the morning and I was sick all the time. And I mean, like, when I was incarcerated, it really wasn't a factor because I had other stuff to worry about. You know, it wasn't like I really paid attention to it. It wasn't until I was at home and I was nodding out at work
Mm.
and I couldn't cut hair. I was like outside smoking a cigarette, falling asleep, and my coworkers noticed that I was doing these things. And I'm like, no, 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 I'm just looking at my phone. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, or I'm tying my shoe. Like, you know, something that was in the nature of that. And at that point, I realized that I had a problem.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, let me just circle back for a minute. So, when you got released from prison, I know it's really hard for people who are released from prison, and oftentimes they will reoffend because of what we were talking about before. I mean, you have so much adversity against you, and you have a background, and nobody wants to hire you. So, tell me, what was that like when you were released from prison?
Well, when I was released from prison, I had a lot of um anxiety. Like I wanted to do so much stuff, and then I had to take the bus and in New York, and it was just a lot of people. I was very naive when I came home from prison. I believed that people honestly like understood what I was going through and they would help me out. And then I realized and I went through a lot of messed up situations. Like I went to a bar and I started drinking and I ended up getting raped after the bar.
Mm.
And I was too drunk to realize, it was 15 years since I had a drink or a drink at all, and I didn't know what I was doing. And a lot of people didn't realize that I was just like this newborn person into society. And I felt, I just I got into a lot of abusive relationships. I mean, personally, I really looked for other people to validate who I was because I had no idea who I was. I didn't even know what I was doing. And I still don't, so that's that that's still a difficult thing to even go through today. And I mean, like applying for jobs, you have to kind of explain I was young. Um, it was a it was a situation that I made a decision and I don't really tell them like what happened. I don't really tell them what I did. I just said I was young and I just made a decision and I no longer act that way and I regret it, so
Yeah, I totally understand that. And, I totally get what you're saying about looking for validation in others because that was a big part of my addiction as well. And it's been a big part of my recovery today, too. And I think it all stems from like, I'm a girl with daddy issues, and I hate that, but that's the way that it is. And I can relate to what you're saying. So
yeah.
I know that you moved from New York and now you're in my area. So tell me, like, why did you move away and what were the circumstances behind that?
Well, I left New York because I was living in a squatter house and I was in a really messed up situation. I ended up sneaking out in the middle of the night and taking a ride to North Carolina. I thought that that would be the move for me, and it wasn't it. Like it was too country, it was too out in the open. It was just like it wasn't I couldn't migrate from the city to something that was so country like that and then be okay with it and be, oh yeah, sober or whatever. And so I ended up using out there also. And once again, I was in a bad situation and then I thought I was like gonna get fed to the pigs in somebody's backyard or something, so I ended up getting picked. I lost an apartment within 48 hours. I had a brand new apartment and because I was getting high in the apartment, I ended up losing it within 48 hours. And I had to pack up my stuff and I had to get a ride to Florida. The guy who I actually ran from in New York was in Florida and came and picked me up. I was living with him and his grandmother in Claremont, Florida, and he was smoking Molly and like he was already with mental issues and schizophrenic and he ended up beating me and like beat me bad. And that was the first time I think I've ever been in a domestic violence situation before. And I remember walking down the road and I had bruises from like my head to my toes. And somebody saw me and called the police, and they arrested him and they put me in a domestic violence shelter. And I was in a domestic violence shelter for a few months, and I ended up getting kicked out for getting high. And then it was off to the races because I was living in hotels all around Florida, from Leesburg to Lady Lake to Kissimmee to Orlando, all over the place. I even went down to Naples, Tarpon Springs, Newport Richey, basically everywhere up and down the coast. What landed me in Sarasota is that I found an Airbnb here, and I ended up coming down here I wanted to be near the water. I liked Tarpon Springs, but it wasn't, it wasn't like, I wasn't ready to be around a whole bunch of Greek people that were like my dad, pretty much. So, um, I ended up finding Sarasota, and I really fell in love with it. What made me fall in love with it was the drum circle, and on Sunday, and I loved that. And at that point, I was just drinking. I thought to myself that, oh, alcohol, I don't do drugs anymore. I just drink. But I became a drunk. Like, I became a point that I don't remember, like the first year that I was here. And I remember I was really sick off of all the alcohol that I was consuming. Like, I was just waking up shaking, waking up hitting a bottle and going to sleep, hitting a bottle. I couldn't function. And then basically I picked up again. I thought that using drugs would have been better than what I was feeling with the alcohol, that I conduct myself better on opiates, my drug of choice. And then that led to every other drug, of course, after it. I ended up getting a house here in Sarasota because I put a good front on and I had a good mask. And it wasn't until my neighbors realized and they saw me, and they were like, yeah, she's definitely getting high. And like, people would OD in my house. Like, I had to save like 8 people's lives with Narcan in my own home, and the cops were always there. I was known as the party house, and I developed a name for me.
Yeah. Well, what led you to wanting to find recovery?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I said, what led you to wanting to find recovery?
I couldn't take it anymore. I had 5 overdoses last year.
Wow.
And in total I have 20 under my belt. And I'm gotten to the point that I was like, okay, I'm gonna die if I don't make this change right now. And I ended up getting another charge for possession of cocaine and resisting arrest when I was homeless out in Orlando, because I did lose my house that I had here. And at that point, I was just like, being back behind bars was the slap in the face for me. It was to hear those keys again after I served 15 years, to hear those gates and to have those lights shining in my face. I was like, okay, God, like I'm back, and something's got to change. And I've always wanted recovery. I've always looked at people and wondered how they did it. And I never really looked at the steps the way that I'm looking at them right now. I always just looked at them like, oh, it's just people that just say that they're doing it, like, oh, it's just something that people, they read. But it's not even just that. It's totally within yourself. And like, right now I'm getting ready to start step 1 with my sponsor, and I'm almost 90 days, and I really took my time to like figure out what it was that I was surrendering to, instead of just saying that I'm just surrendering and yeah, I'm an addict. It's a lot deeper than that, because I have a lot of things that I've learned in jail that aren't really healthy, that I've known my entire life. And in there, it's like, you have to be that way. It's like, or if not, you're gonna get cut, you're gonna get hit with a lock, something's gonna happen. But out here, it's people don't live that way. And I have to learn that it's a totally different way of life. It's a totally different way of thinking.
Absolutely. That is so true, girl. I'm so proud of you. And you're right. Like, I remember thinking the same thing before. Like, what are these steps on the wall going to do to change my life? Like, none of these people are actually not using, because I couldn't imagine life without substances. But you're absolutely right. Like, it's about surrendering, and it all happens within. And you are doing that. So I am
Thank
so proud of you for that. Okay.
you.
So, what advice would you give to somebody who is maybe been recently incarcerated or is just coming into recovery, or maybe doesn't even feel like they're worthy of recovery yet? What would you say to them?
I would say don't be so impulsive. Um, I would say that it's not, well, if they were incarcerated, mind your business. You know what I mean? That's the number one thing. I know that people will talk like you want to make your time go by, and even in a halfway house or a transitional house kind of setting, it's you at that point when you have to live and work with others 24/7, you really need to just find it in yourself that sometimes things aren't worth talking about. And they're just whatever you're thinking doesn't need to be said all the time, you know? Um and that's another thing, is also don't trust your own thoughts, you know, because you really don't know what you're gonna do. You know, you never know. Coming home, I would say people, places, and things.
Yeah.
People, places, and things. If you come home and you're surrounded by the same people and doing the same things, you're gonna it's a revolving door. It's always gonna come back. It's like it never stops. And no matter how, and especially here in Florida, because I mean, you guys, I mean, it's a lot different than New York, but it's a revolving door for sure. And also, if you're on parole or probation, don't think that you can get away with urines and like the 5-hour energy bottle or the fake pee or the whiz that guy, you know, it doesn't, eventually it shows and it catches up, because I really thought that I could get away with that, and it didn't happen.
Hmm. Yeah. Same, girl. That's why I got violated on my probation for trying to fake a drug test.
Yeah,
It
right.
did not work.
It
I mean,
didn't
it
work.
worked until it didn't work.
Right.
So tell us just a little bit, this will be my last question, but tell me a little bit about like what your life is now in recovery.
My life is now in recovery is I'm finding a way to utilize all the stuff that I've been through, and for the better. I mean, not only that, but I've seen the worst happen to people and them lose it all. And for even when people complain about little stuff, I look at them and I'm like, you know, you have no idea how blessed you are. And just realizing every single day that I'm even blessed to be here, because I mean, not a lot of people live after one overdose, let alone 20, you know? So I'm just right now, I'm just realizing that every day, no matter if it's a good or a bad day, is meant to be, and whatever's written is written.
Absolutely. I love that so much. So
Mhm.
thank you so much for coming and sharing your story today. Angela has went from the prolific smuggler to a recovering addict with a purpose and a future. And I am so proud of you. I'm going to link her show in the description so you guys can check that out as well. And thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome, Sonia. I love you.
Love you too, girl.
Bye.